Look closely at the night sky, and you will see a universe built entirely on starlight. For centuries, we mapped the cosmos under a simple assumption that galaxies grow and merge and die over trillions of years. But recent deep field data has exposed a cold, silent crisis unfolding right now in the deep void. Galaxies are not just dying, they are vanishing. Structures containing billions of solar systems are actively being erased from our view, leaving behind vast pockets of absolute nothingness that defy every known model of cosmic expansion. Something out there is systematically clearing the canvas of space, and it is moving closer. Tonight we will pull back the veil on this terrifying cosmic erasure. We are going to trace the science behind these vanishing galactic structures, map the expanding boundaries of the great voids, and investigate whether our own Milky Way is sitting directly on the edge of the next erasure event. Settle in, clear your mind, and let us dive directly into the briefing. Everything you were taught about the beginning of time is officially a lie. We look up at the stars and feel small, but we also feel safe. We were sold a story in school that space is a slow, predictable machine, where stars burn quietly for billions of years and galaxies drift like island ships in an eternal ocean. It is a beautiful, comforting thought that lets us sleep at night, believing that whatever madness happens on Earth, the universe remains a fixed, unshakable sanctuary. But 18 months ago, that illusion of cosmic safety did not just crack, it was completely vaporized. A series of quiet data logs from our most advanced telescopes revealed that chunks of our universe are being turned off. Imagine waking up tomorrow morning, looking at a map of the world, and realizing that the entire continent of Asia is simply gone. No rubble, no smoke, no rising sea levels, just an empty, pitch-black ocean where billions of people and thousands of years of history used to stand. That is exactly what astronomers are staring at right now in the deep trenches of space. Massive galactic structures that hold hundreds of billions of suns, planets, and potential civilizations are not fading out over billions of years. They are being deleted from the sky. The panic inside the scientific community is being kept behind double-locked doors because the math makes no sense. When an automated data tracking pipeline cross-referenced the coordinates of stable galaxies mapped in 2010 with the fresh telemetry coming from our latest infrared orbital arrays, the system did not return a faint light signal or a dust cloud interference warning. It returned an absolute null value, a digital zero. When human analysts saw the error codes, they assumed the software had glitched or the telescope sensors had been blinded by cosmic rays. They manually aimed our most powerful ground-based observatories at those exact coordinates, opened the camera shutters, and let the instruments absorb the incoming light for hours. They expected to see the familiar, glowing spiral arms of ancient star clusters, but the monitors remained solid, unbroken black. There was nothing there. Not a single photon of light, not a trace of heat, not even the faint radio whisper that every object in the cosmos is forced to leave behind. A piece of the universe spanning 100,000 light-years across had vanished into thin air, leaving behind an empty vacuum that defies every textbook law of physics. This is the moment where your biological intuition should scream. A galaxy is not a temporary cloud of smoke. It is a gravitational fortress. It is a monster-scale structure held together by an immense, invisible web of dark matter that has survived for over 13 billion years. To tear a galaxy apart through natural cosmic collisions takes a span of time longer than human existence. It causes massive, violent ripples, runaway stars thrown into the void like burning debris, blinding shockwaves of superheated gas, and glowing radiation scars that ring across space for eons. But in these newly discovered dead zones, there are no scars. There is no lingering heat. There are no refugee stars screaming through the dark. The erasure is so clean, so flawless, and so absolute that it feels intelligent. It is the cosmic equivalent of walking into a closed room and realizing that someone has wiped a massive chalk drawing off the blackboard with a single damp cloth, leaving no dust behind. As the months rolled into early 2026, the silence among professional astronomers grew terrifying. They quietly expanded their searches, digging into historical archives to compare old Hubble plates with modern digital telemetry. And what they found has shattered the baseline of physics. This is not a single, isolated anomaly happening at the unreachable edge of creation. Pockets of absolute nothingness are opening up spontaneously across both the northern and southern skies. In public-facing academic journals, scientists are using carefully guarded, polite phrases like unaccounted for luminosity deficits or anomalous high redshift dropouts to hide the truth. But if you strip away the heavy mathematics, the reality is stark. Something is systematically clearing the canvas of space, structure by structure, and the speed of this erasure is accelerating. Think of it like sitting in a historic grandfather library at midnight. The room is vast and silent, filled with millions of old, leather-bound books that contain the entire history of the world. You feel completely secure surrounded by this permanent vault of knowledge. But as you walk down the central aisle, you notice a blank space on a shelf where a massive encyclopedia stood yesterday. You move to the next aisle, and another book is gone. You reach out your hand to touch the binding of a historical journal, and right before your eyes, the text fades, the paper dissolves into nothingness, and the shelf becomes completely bare. The library isn't being burned, it isn't being robbed, it is being systematically erased from the inside out while the world sleeps, totally unaware that their sky is being altered in the dark. We are living on a dangerous chronological delay. Because light takes time to travel across the terrifying distances of space, when we look out into the night sky, we are never seeing the universe as it exists right now. If we observe a galaxy 5 billion light-years away, we are looking at an old recording, a cosmic message that left that structure 5 billion years ago, when our own Earth was nothing but a chaotic cloud of dust circling a newborn sun. This means the terrifying erasure events our digital sensors are picking up today did not happen last week. They happened millions of years ago. We are just now receiving the delayed mail of a cosmic execution that took place when dinosaurs walked the Earth. And that realization forces us to face a chilling psychological question. If the light arriving today shows a universe that was already being dismantled millions of years ago, what does the sky actually look like right now? If we could instantly shatter the speed of light and look at the cosmos in its true present tense, how much of our night sky is even left? How close has this hunger come to our own stellar neighborhood? The answer to that question is not hidden in the stars we can see. It is buried inside the oldest, largest, and most terrifying empty space ever found by human intelligence, a place where the rules of reality died long before our species was born. We are moving away from the scattered pockets of the sky surveys and entering the territory of the original cosmic scar. A region of space that shouldn't mathematically exist, and it is broadcasting a silent warning directly toward our own galaxy. To grasp the true depth of the crisis unfolding across the cosmic canvas, we must leave behind the isolated anomalies of recent sky surveys and travel to a place that has haunted the margins of theoretical astrophysics for nearly half a century. Long before our automated pipelines began flagging the sudden disappearance of distant galaxies, there existed a single monstrous scar on the geometry of the universe, a place where the light simply ends. If you direct your gaze toward the constellation Boötes, situated just north of the celestial equator, you are looking toward a region of space that should not mathematically exist within our current framework of cosmic evolution. Discovered in the early 1980s by a team of astronomers who were mapping the large-scale structure of the universe, this region quickly became known as the Boötes Void, or more accurately among those who study the cold mechanics of deep space, the Great Nothing. To the human mind, conditioned to the scale of planetary systems and local stellar clusters, the dimensions of the Boötes Void are entirely incomprehensible. It is a vast, roughly spherical expanse of absolute vacuum, measuring approximately 330 million light-years in diameter. To put that into perspective, a typical region of the universe of that identical volume should contain anywhere between 10,000 and 20,000 massive, star-forming galaxies. It should be a thriving, glowing cosmic web of filaments, gas clouds, and gravitational clusters, brilliant with the energy of trillions of individual suns. Instead, when our most sensitive telescopes peer into the dark interior of the Boötes void, they find a pristine, terrifying desert. Across a distance that would take a beam of light over 300 million years to cross, human instruments have managed to locate only a few dozen lonely, isolated galaxies scattered like dust motes in an abandoned cathedral. The rest is a vacuum so pure, so unyielding, that it leaves the fabric of spacetime entirely empty. For decades, the scientific establishment maintained a comfortable, reassuring hypothesis to explain this cosmic aberration. The standard explanation, the one taught in university lecture halls and printed in the glossaries of astronomy textbooks, was that the Boötes void was a natural, albeit extreme, product of gravitational clustering. The theory assumed that during the earliest epochs of the universe, minor density fluctuations caused matter to pull away from certain regions and concentrate in others. Over billions of years, gravity acted as an invisible vacuum cleaner, dragging galaxies out of what would become the void and pulling them into the massive, dense superclusters that border its edges. The void was treated as a passive structure, a quiet, harmless backyard where nothing happened because there was simply no matter left to interact. It was a static artifact of the Big Bang, an ancient empty space that had remained unchanged for over 10 billion years. We looked at it and felt safe because we believed it was a completed process, a dead monument to the universe's ancient geometry. But that passive, comfortable narrative collapsed 18 months ago during a comprehensive reanalysis of the void's boundary telemetry. The project was supposed to be routine. A team of international researchers utilized archival deep-field data, combined with fresh infrared scans, to create a high-fidelity, three-dimensional kinetic map of the galaxies sitting on the very lip of the Boötes void. They wanted to measure the precise speed and direction of these boundary structures to verify the old gravitational models. They expected to see the galaxies moving outward, away from the center of the void, pulled by the immense gravitational attraction of the surrounding superclusters. That was what the textbooks predicted. That was what the math required. Instead, the kinetic data revealed a structural nightmare. The galaxies marking the boundary of the Great Nothing were not moving according to the laws of standard cosmic expansion or local gravitational attraction. Their trajectories were erratic, heavily distorted, and bent inward toward the vacuum itself. More disturbingly, when the team compared the older positions of these boundary galaxies from early digital sky surveys with the latest telemetry, they discovered a terrifying discrepancy. The boundaries of the Boötes void were not static. The void was expanding, and it was not expanding due to the natural, uniform stretching of the universe. It was expanding because the galaxies on its perimeter were systematically losing their light, dropping out of our detection filters, and vanishing into the dark. The implications of this reanalysis sent a wave of silent panic through the inner circle of professional astronomy. If the void is expanding by actively consuming or erasing the structures on its borders, then the old model of a passive, gravitationally cleared empty space is completely dead. The Great Nothing is not a passive vacuum. It is an active mechanism, a growing, expanding boundary of absolute erasure that is eating its way through the living tissue of the cosmos. The data suggests that the rate of this boundary expansion is accelerating, defying every cosmological simulation we have ever built. Pockets of space that were recorded as dense, stable stellar fields a generation ago are now showing signs of localized cooling and systematic mass deficits. The void is moving outward, encroaching upon the stable sectors of the night sky, and its shadow is lengthening. When you sit with this data in the quiet hours of the night, the true horror of the phenomenon begins to take hold of your perception. If you were to place an observer at the absolute center of the Boötes void, looking out into the dark, the view would be radically different from the sky we see from Earth. From our position in the Orion arm of the Milky Way, the night sky is a crowded, brilliant showcase of cosmic history. We are surrounded by neighboring galaxies, local star clusters, and glowing nebulae. But if you were standing at the center of the Great Nothing, the sky would be completely, uniformly black. If human civilization had arisen on a planet inside the heart of the Boötes void, we would not have discovered the existence of other galaxies until the development of advanced telescopes in the mid-20th century. We would have looked up at a sky of total, unyielding void, believing that our lonely system was the entirety of creation. We would have lived in an island of total isolation, completely cut off from the light of the broader universe. And now, the data is telling us that this isolation is a destiny that is actively crawling toward us. The expanding perimeter of the Boötes void is not a localized problem. The mechanism driving this erasure, the same mechanism that our automated sky surveys are now detecting in random, quiet pockets across both celestial hemispheres, appears to be systemic. The universe is beginning to pocket. Pockets of absolute zero signal are opening up spontaneously, like microscopic leaks in a high-pressure hull, draining the energy, the radiation, and the matter out of entire galactic sectors. We are watching the slow-motion fragmentation of spacetime itself, where the bridges of light that connect the star systems are being systematically severed one by one. The technical analysts who are cleared to read these journal articles are struggling to find a physical anchor for what they are observing. When we look at the galaxies that are currently sitting on the precipice of this erasure, their light signatures show a peculiar, unprecedented degradation. It is not the standard redshifting caused by the expansion of space. It is a structural unraveling. The cosmic gas clouds that fuel star formation are the first to show anomalies. They lose their thermal equilibrium, dropping to temperatures that shouldn't be possible in the vicinity of active stellar cores. Then, the collective luminosity of the galaxy begins to drop across all wavelengths, from ultraviolet down to radio streams. It is as if the fundamental constants of nature, the underlying quantum rules that allow matter to hold itself together and radiate energy, are losing their grip on the structure. The galaxy doesn't explode. It doesn't collapse into a supermassive black hole. It simply loses its ability to register in our universe. It becomes a ghost, then a shadow, and then nothing at all. We are left standing on the shoreline of a darkening ocean, watching the distant islands blink out of existence one by one. The timeline we were promised, the one that guaranteed our safety for trillions of years under the slow, predictable burning of the stars, has been replaced by an uncertain, high-stakes countdown. The Great Nothing of Boötes is no longer an anomaly to be studied from a safe distance. It is a prototype. It is a glimpse into the final architecture of our sky. The automated systems are continuing to monitor the boundary lines, tracking the incoming telemetry from our orbital arrays, waiting to see which sector will be the next to show a null value code. The mail from the deep cosmos is arriving late, carrying the news of destructions that occurred before our oceans even formed, and every delivery brings us closer to the realization that the vacuum is no longer empty. It is hungry. Stay with me, because as we push past the expanding boundaries of the Boötes void, we must confront the underlying physics of this absolute erasure. We have to look past the macro-scale structures of the stars and dive directly into the quantum engine room to understand the cold, mathematical reality of a universe whose very laws are beginning to fail. Welcome to the physics of absolute erasure. When we step out of the massive geometric void of Boötes and try to push our understanding into the actual math behind this erasure, we find ourselves standing in a completely broken engine room. For over a century, the entire structure of human science has rested on a single, sacred law: the conservation of energy and information. We were taught that nothing in this universe is ever truly destroyed. A star can run out of fuel, collapse under its own weight, and explode into a supernova, but its matter is simply recycled. Its heavy elements become the dust clouds that form new worlds, its light continues to travel across the infinite dark, and its core becomes a dense neutron star or a black hole. The particles change their configuration, their temperature, and their state, but they remain on the cosmic ledger. Quantum mechanics takes this rule even further, stating that the fundamental quantum information of any object can never be deleted from reality. If you burn a book, the pages are turned to ash and smoke, but if you had a powerful enough supercomputer, you could theoretically track every single atom of carbon, every photon of light heat, and every molecule of gas, and perfectly reconstruct the text on those pages. Reality keeps a permanent record. But the vanishing data coming from our deep field arrays is systematically shattering this fundamental baseline. In the sectors where these galaxies are being wiped out, we are not looking at a violent explosion, nor are we looking at the gravitational theft of matter by a larger neighbor. We are looking at a total, localized bankruptcy of physical existence. When an object collapses into a standard black hole, it leaves a massive gravitational signature. It warps spacetime so violently that the stars behind it are visually distorted by gravitational lensing, and the matter falling into its event horizon frictionally heats up to millions of degrees, screaming in bright X-ray emissions right before it crosses the point of no return. Black holes are messy, loud, and incredibly obvious eaters. But in these erasure zones, there is a terrifying absolute silence. There is no gravitational lensing. There is no accretion disk throwing out high-energy radiation. The space where 100 billion suns were actively fusing hydrogen just 10 years ago does not exhibit a heavy gravitational drag. It exhibits the flat, unwarped spacetime of an empty vacuum. The matter didn't fall into something. It was unmade. To understand how a physical structure can simply be extracted from the universe without leaving a footprint, we have to look at the quantum fields that dictate our reality. Everything you see, touch, and interact with is not solid. At the fundamental level, you, the Earth beneath your feet, and the most distant stars are made of quantum fields that permeate all of space. A particle, like an electron or a quark, is simply a localized excitement, a tiny vibration or a ripple in these underlying fields. Think of the universe as a vast, calm ocean of liquid energy, and matter as the tiny whitecaps and waves dancing on the surface. As long as the ocean maintains its precise physical properties, those waves can travel, interact, and persist indefinitely. But if the chemistry of the water itself changes at a specific point, if the fundamental tension of the fluid drops to absolute zero, the waves cannot simply move away. They lose the medium that allowed them to exist in the first place. They flatten out instantly, disappearing back into the smooth, silent surface of the water without leaving a ripple behind. This is the nightmare that theoretical physicists are quietly debating in dark rooms. What if the underlying fields of the universe are experiencing a localized drop in their fundamental tension? What if the quantum engine room is turning off its power switches in specific pockets of space? If a region of spacetime loses its baseline quantum field value, the atoms within that region can no longer maintain their structural bonds. The electrons drop out of their orbital shells, the quarks inside the protons and neutrons lose their binding energy, and the entire physical architecture of a star system simply collapses into an unobservable state. It is not an explosion that pushes matter outward into space. It is a profound, inward unraveling where the very concept of mass loses its meaning. The light emitted by these structures doesn't get blocked by a dust cloud on its way to Earth. The atoms that were generating those photons simply cease to exist, cutting off the transmission of light mid-sentence. If this unmaking is happening at the quantum level, it explains why our particle detectors on Earth are picking up erratic, untraceable whispers during these events. Deep underground, inside heavily shielded chambers filled with thousands of tons of ultrapure water, our neutrino experiments are designed to watch for the most elusive particles in creation. Neutrinos are ghost particles, born in the hearts of supernovas and nuclear reactors, capable of passing through light years of solid lead without hitting a single atom. They are the ultimate cosmic messengers, capable of traveling unimpeded from the deepest catastrophes in space. And recently, our automated alarm systems, networks designed to catch the immediate particle bursts of collapsing stars before their light even reaches us, have logged a series of peculiar, low-frequency data anomalies. These are not the sharp, energetic spikes characteristic of a star dying in a standard supernova explosion. They are long, muffled systemic hums that register across the entire detector array simultaneously, like the sound of a distant structural beam warping under immense, silent pressure. It is the acoustic signature of a cosmic frame fracturing. When a galaxy is removed from the night sky, the sudden, violent shifts in the localized energy density of spacetime must create a reaction, and these ghost-like neutrino hums may be the only warning flag humanity will ever get. The technical analysts call these signals vacuum stress anomalies. It is a sterile, safe phrase designed to prevent panic among the engineers who monitor our orbital infrastructure, but the raw data paints an emotionally suffocating picture. We are watching the slow, systemic decay of the cosmological framework itself. Pockets of our universe are experiencing an existential phase transition, converting from a stable state where chemistry, biology, and starlight are allowed to exist, into a lower, more fundamental ground state where nothing can survive. The most terrifying characteristic of this quantum unraveling is its absolute stealth. Because this phase transition alters the behavior of light itself, the boundary of the erasure moves at a speed that makes advanced observation mathematically impossible from a frontal trajectory. If a pocket of absolute erasure is expanding through space, the light carrying the news of its expansion is trapped or unmade at the exact same rate as the boundary itself. This means that if such a boundary were heading toward our corner of the Milky Way, we would receive no light signals warning us of its approach. We would look out through our telescopes and see a perfectly normal sky, completely unaware that the boundary of absolute nothingness is closing in on our outer star systems. The stars would not turn red, they would not flicker, and they would not give us a century of warning to contemplate our place in the cosmos. They would simply disappear from our tracking monitors one by one, field by field, as the edge of the unmaking passes through our sector. We have spent centuries looking up at the sky, using our telescopes as time machines to read the glorious, burning history of the cosmos. We took pride in our ability to decipher the light of stars that died billions of years ago, believing that our intellect had mastered the grand timeline of creation. But now, we are forced to confront the reality that the time machine is lying to us. The ancient starlight filling our eyes tonight is a beautiful illusion, a projection of a universe that may have already been systematically dismantled behind our backs. The stable, mathematical laws that we carved into our gold plaques and launched into the interstellar void are not permanent truths. They are localized privileges, valid only as long as the quantum floor beneath our feet remains stable. And that floor is showing signs of structural fatigue. Stay with me, because as we try to locate the source of this quantum fatigue, we realize that this isn't a random, chaotic malfunction of space. As we track the specific distribution of these disappearing galaxies and align them with the kinetic vectors of our neighboring superclusters, a chilling cosmic architecture begins to emerge. This isn't a mindless decay. It is a targeted, directional sweep. We are about to look at the hidden companions, the dark gravitational rivers that are actively pulling the living matter of our universe into a silent, pre-planned alignment. Welcome to the Silent Fleet and the Companion Hypothesis. To grasp how this targeted erasure operates on a structural level, we have to look past the single isolated gaps in our telemetry and consider a possibility that strikes at the very heart of cosmic geography. For generations, we believed that galaxies were completely independent island universes, adrift in an infinite ocean of vacuum, moving only under the slow, clean influence of visible gravity. We mapped our local group, calculated the paths of our neighbors like Andromeda, and assumed that the empty space between these massive structures was completely dead, inactive, and empty. It was a comfortable way to look at the sky, a model that treated the universe as a simple, open field where everything could be seen if you just had a powerful enough telescope. But when you plot the precise locations of the newly discovered erasure zones on a large-scale map of the cosmos, the illusion of random, chaotic accidents completely dissolves. These missing galaxies are not scattered like random dice across the dark. They are forming straight, intentional corridors of emptiness. It is a geometric alignment that suggests a chilling alternative. Our universe is not an open ocean, but a system of hidden rivers, and something massive is clearing out the channels. This brings us directly to what senior technical analysts whisper about as the companion hypothesis. In standard astronomy, we are very familiar with binary star systems, setups where two stars are locked in a gravitational dance, orbiting a common center of mass. In many of these pairs, there is a visible bright star and a hidden dark companion, such as a dormant neutron star or a quiet stellar black hole. To an outside observer looking through a basic telescope, the bright star appears to be completely alone, behaving normally. But as time passes, the hidden companion draws closer in its orbit, its immense, unseen gravitational tide reaching out and violently ripping the outer envelope of gas away from the bright star. The matter is drained away silently, bleeding off the surface into the dark companion without a standard explosion, until the primary star is completely unmade from within. The companion hypothesis takes this exact lethal dance and scales it up from a single pair of stars to the scale of entire superclusters of galaxies. What if our visible universe, the cosmic web of starlight that we have spent centuries mapping, is locked in a gravitational embrace with a massive, invisible twin structure? A shadow cosmos made of matter that does not interact with light, moving on a monumental multi-billion-year orbital trajectory. As the structures of this silent companion sweep through the fabric of our space-time, they would not collide with our galaxies like two billiard balls smashing together on a table. Instead, their immense, localized dark field potentials would interface directly with the underlying quantum fields of our reality. The result would be a clean, systematic extraction of matter. As the invisible arms of this shadow structure pass through a galactic sector, the stars within that sector are subjected to a profound tidal disruption at the fundamental particle level. The mass is drained away into the dark sector, leaving behind the pristine, unwarped pockets of absolute zero signal that our surveys are now logging with increasing frequency. If this model is correct, it means we are not watching a natural, internal decay of the universe's laws. We are watching a collision in slow motion, a structural overwrite where a dominant, invisible framework is actively erasing our visible universe to make room for its own geometry. The corridors of emptiness we are mapping are the tracks left behind by the vanguard of this silent fleet as it cuts through the living tissue of our sky. It is a process that operates with the cold, unyielding efficiency of an automated harvesting operation, clearing out the star systems field by field. And the most unsettling aspect of this alignment is where the corridors are pointing. When you follow the trajectory of these expanding absences and trace their directional vectors through the celestial coordinates, you realize that the sweep is not moving away from us. It is closing in on the local superclusters that anchor our own coordinate grid. We have spent our entire lives looking up at the constellations, feeling completely secure in the immense size of the void. We believed that the vast distances between galaxies were an absolute shield, a protective buffer that guaranteed humanity would have trillions of years to evolve, explore, and understand the cosmos before any large-scale threat could ever reach our solar system. But the companion hypothesis collapses that timeline entirely. The buffer zones are being cleared out. The empty space that once comforted us is being transformed into an active frontline, where structures containing billions of potential worlds are being unmade long before their stars have a chance to run out of nuclear fuel. The mail from the deep trenches of space is arriving with a grim, repetitive message. The isolation of our galaxy is no longer a permanent guarantee. It is a countdown. We are left standing on a rapidly shrinking island of starlight, watching the horizons of our universe grow smaller and quieter with each passing generation. The automated monitoring programs are continuing to stream their telemetry down to ground stations, logging the subtle, cold dropouts that signify another deletion event in the dark. The scientists who have the clearance to analyze these maps are watching the lines tighten, tracking the approach of a structural boundary that cannot be stopped by any law of physics we possess. The time machine of the night sky is winding down, showing us the final, empty configuration of a universe that is systematically running out of space. To comprehend how this invisible twin cosmos could interact with our own without triggering traditional gravitational metrics, we must look into how dark matter behaves on a macroscopic scale. We have known for decades that visible matter, everything we can see, from the dust beneath our fingernails to the brightest supernovas, makes up a measly 5% of the total energy density of the universe. The rest is divided between dark energy and dark matter. Dark matter has always been treated by mainstream academia as a passive, stabilizing force. It is the invisible scaffolding, the cosmic glue that forms massive halos around galaxies, providing the extra gravitational pull necessary to keep stars from flying off into deep space as they rotate. We treated it like concrete foundation work in a skyscraper, completely silent, completely static, and fundamentally dumb. It was a single, non-interacting type of particle that did nothing but exert a gentle, steady pull. But the data forcing its way through our orbital arrays suggests that this assumption was born out of pure human arrogance. What if dark matter is not a single, boring particle? What if it is an entire, hidden periodic table of elements that we cannot see? What if it possesses its own dark electromagnetism, its own dark nuclear forces, and its own complex chemistry that mirrors or completely dwarfs our own? If the dark sector is complex, then it is capable of forming structures just as intricate as galaxies and stars. Except these structures would be entirely invisible to our optical and radio instruments. They would occupy the exact same physical coordinates as our universe, existing like a ghost shifting through a solid wall, totally undetected until their internal dynamics undergo a major orbital shift. This is what the term the silent fleet actually represents to those studying the telemetry. It is not an armada of physical spaceships sailing through the dark. It is a collection of supermassive, non-baryonic matter concentrations moving along their own internal orbital planes. For billions of years, these dark matter networks drifted along trajectories that ran parallel to our visible cosmic filaments. They were the silent partners in the universe's expansion. But the universe is aging. The expansion rate is changing, and the large-scale gravitational balances that kept these two parallel worlds separated are beginning to decay. The dark trajectories are starting to cross into our path, intersecting with our material plane like a massive iron wheel, grinding through a delicate web of glass. When a high-density node of this silent fleet passes directly through a visible galaxy, the interaction is completely silent but catastrophic for the structures involved. In our current understanding of physics, we assume that gravity is a one-way street that affects all matter equally. If you have mass, you pull things toward you. But at the boundary interfaces where the visible world meets the high-concentration dark sector, the equations start to break down. The massive local potential of the dark twin creates a localized field inversion. The dark forces begin to manipulate the vacuum expectation value of our regular fields. To a human observer equipped with an ordinary telescope, the stars within that galaxy would look perfectly normal one year, but over the next decade, their internal nuclear furnaces would begin to stall. Not because they ran out of hydrogen, but because the dark field is actively altering the fine structure constant within that localized pocket of space. The rules that allow a proton to fuse with another proton are subtly shifted. The nuclear cross-section drops. The star stops generating heat. Its envelope expands without the traditional explosion, and its matter slips quietly down into the lower energy state of the dark twin. This structural stealing explains the terrifying linearity of the absences we are mapping. If the erasure were caused by a random internal failure of physics, like a localized quantum fluctuation or a spontaneous vacuum decay, the dead zones would appear as perfectly random bubbles popping uniformly across the universe. They would look like pockets of boiling water in a pot, but they don't. The data maps show long, sharp, needle-like trails of absolute vacuum carving through dense superclusters. These are structural cuts. It is the unmistakable signature of a massive object moving along a definitive vector, unmaking everything along its line of sight as it sweeps through the cosmic grid. We are tracking these incisions as they slice through neighboring filaments, watching the light drops occur in a sequential chronological order that allows us to calculate the true speed of the oncoming front. The incisions are clean, leaving no trailing gas clouds, no stray electromagnetic emissions, and no gravitational anomalies. It is a total extraction of reality along a moving timeline. The technical teams monitoring these corridors are facing an existential crisis of interpretation. If the silent fleet is moving along an orbital path that cuts directly through our local group of galaxies, then every calculation we have made regarding the long-term survival of our solar system is completely obsolete. We were comforted by the fact that our sun has 5 billion years of fuel left before it expands into a red giant and swallows the Earth. We were comforted by the mathematical certainty that the Andromeda Galaxy wouldn't collide with the Milky Way for another 4 billion years. These numbers gave us a sense of infinite time, a guarantee that humanity's descendants would have plenty of room to grow and escape across the stellar systems before the clock ran out. But the oncoming incisions from the silent fleet do not care about nuclear fuel cycles or traditional galactic collisions. They are moving along an independent chronological track that could breach our local group within a time frame that is measured in generations, not billions of years. The fence lines of our cosmic sanctuary are being taken down, and we are being forced to watch the perimeter collapse in real time. The data coming down from our orbital observatories is no longer just scientific information. It is a ledger of a closing horizon. The analysts who are cleared to see the unedited maps are watching the dead zones widen, tracking the kinetic vectors of the silent fleet as it narrows the gap between its vanguard and our outer star systems. The universe is undergoing a structural transition that cannot be reversed, a reorganization of matter that leaves our visible world entirely on the cutting room floor. The starlight that has guided our species for thousands of years is a dying currency, a fading message from a sky that is being cleared out systematically behind the veil of the speed of light. We are sitting on the edge of a great emptiness, listening to the final, quiet echoes of a universe that is systematically running out of options. Stay with me, because to confirm if this dark harvesting structure is already breaching our immediate perimeter, we must look at the latest, unedited telemetry arriving from our most advanced eye in the dark. We have to examine the raw infrared streams that were just captured at the absolute edge of the observable void, data that has forced the leading orbital observation teams to confront a reality that is far more terrifying than a simple empty sky. Welcome to Telemetry from the Edge and James Webb's infrared proof. To confirm whether the advance guard of this invisible twin cosmos has officially breached our immediate local perimeter, we must turn our focus away from the historical archives of ground-based sky surveys and look directly at the raw telemetry pouring in from humanity's most advanced orbital eye. Positioned 1 million miles away from Earth at the second Lagrange point, floating in the frozen, gravitationally stable isolation of deep space, the James Webb Space Telescope was built specifically to look through the dark. Unlike older optical instruments that are fundamentally blinded by the thick clouds of interstellar gas and cosmic dust that choke the pathways of the universe, this machine operates entirely within the deep infrared spectrum. It does not look at the light we see. It reads the faint, stretched-out heat signatures of objects that are so distant and so ancient that their emissions have been traveling toward us since the dawn of cosmic time. It was designed to see the very first star's ignition, to document the birth of the earliest galaxies, and to provide human science with a pristine, unedited look at the foundation work of our reality. It was supposed to find answers. Instead, it has delivered an empirical proof of a broken timeline. When the orbital observatory directs its massive, gold-plated honeycomb mirrors toward the edges of our known celestial coordinate system, the data streams shifting through its deep space telemetry network are supposed to show a very specific, mathematically predictable distribution of matter. According to the standard cosmological model, the further back we look into cosmic history, the more primitive, chaotic, and unformed the universe should appear. We should see small, infant proto-galaxies, messy, disorganized clumps of hydrogen and helium gas that are just beginning to pull themselves together under the slow, gentle influence of gravity. These structures should be faint, dim, and structurally immature, representing the early steps of a universe that is just beginning to build its cosmic architecture. That is the baseline framework that has governed every astrophysical simulation, every academic lecture, and every deep space mission profile for the last 40 years. It was a comfortable timeline that gave human science a definitive sense of order. But the unedited infrared data arriving at ground stations over the last several months has completely demolished this entire foundation. When the telescope executed a series of ultra-deep exposures, targeting the highly stable, empty sectors that sit just on the periphery of our local supercluster, the sensors did not return images of faint, infant star-forming clouds. Instead, emerging from the pitch-black infrared void, the mirrors captured the crisp, unmistakable light signatures of massive, fully formed, highly mature spiral and elliptical galaxies. These are cosmic monsters, structures containing hundreds of billions of suns, advanced stellar populations, and massive systems of heavy elemental dust that should require tens of billions of years of slow, orderly evolution to construct. Yet, according to their cosmological redshift values, the metric we use to calculate their distance and age based on the expansion of space, these hypermature structures are sitting at a point in the timeline where the universe was less than 500 million years old. They are fully grown adults sitting inside the cosmic nursery, completely defying the linear progression of time. The initial reaction within the elite circles of institutional astrophysics was one of profound, technical denial. Software engineers checked the calibration matrices of the mid-infrared instrument, thinking that a processing artifact or a stray thermal leak from the telescope's sunshield had corrupted the pixel grids. Data analysts ran the raw telemetry through multiple independent pipelines, hoping to find a systematic error in how the cosmic distance ladders were being calculated, but the numbers remained unyielding. The light profiles were clean, the spectral lines were sharp, and the mass metrics were completely undeniable. These massive, mature structures were physically there, occupying coordinates in deep space where the universe should have been nothing more than a featureless, hot soup of primordial gas. To the human mind, this is not just a statistical anomaly, it is an existential paradox. It is the mathematical equivalent of walking into an ancient, sealed archaeological tomb that has been untouched for 5,000 years, and finding a modern, ticking digital watch sitting pristine on the stone altar. The watch should not exist within that timeline, yet its physical presence forces you to realize that everything you thought you knew about the history of that room is completely wrong. As the data from these deep exposures was mapped and analyzed, a secondary, far more terrifying anomaly began to register across the telescope's tracking sensors. These hypermature, impossible galaxies were not moving according to the standard, uniform expansion of the local spacetime fabric. When you measure the light signatures of a normal galaxy, the expansion of the universe stretches the wavelength of that light toward the red end of the spectrum, a phenomenon known as cosmological redshift. The further away a galaxy is, the faster it appears to be moving away from us, creating a clean, linear relationship that allows us to map the expansion rate of space. But the telemetry from the edge of our local sector shows that the light from these impossible structures is undergoing a bizarre, nonlinear degradation. The redshifting is erratic, fluctuating in waves that correspond to no known model of dark energy or dark matter distribution. It is as if the light itself is being subjected to a dragging force, a localized resistance that is systematically siphoning off its kinetic energy before it can escape the sector. When the orbital analysis teams pulled the structural cross-sections of these impossible galaxies, they discovered that the outer boundaries of their stellar disks were not fading out in the clean, exponential drop-off characteristic of standard galactic geometry. The outer arms of these massive star systems are being cleanly, sharply clipped. It is a structural cut that follows a mathematically precise, linear boundary line, cutting directly through dense stellar nurseries and ripping away millions of star systems mid-orbit. The material inside the boundary line is bright, active, and perfectly formed. The material outside that line does not exist. There are no trailing gravitational currents, no clouds of shattered planetary debris, and no massive bursts of gamma-ray radiation that would signify a physical collision between material objects. The stars are simply running into an invisible wall of absolute non-existence, passing across a definitive coordinate plane and instantly losing their ability to register within our electromagnetic spectrum. This empirical proof brings us face to face with the raw mechanism of the unmaking. What the James Webb Space Telescope is actually photographing at the edge of our sector is the physical boundary line where our material universe meets the advancing front of the silent twin cosmos. The reason these galaxies appear impossibly mature and older than the universe itself is because they do not belong to our timeline. They are structural remnants, massive pieces of a completely independent cosmic framework that existed long before our Big Bang ever set the clock of our reality. They are being pushed into our material plane as the invisible orbital twin grinds through our coordinates, emerging from the dark sector like the submerged hull of a massive ship rising out of a foggy ocean. We are not looking at the birth of our universe. We are looking at the forced intrusion of another reality entirely, and that reality is systematically overwriting our own. The technical teams who hold the decryption keys for this unedited telemetry are watching the boundary lines shift in real time. By comparing the sequential data drops from the telescope's automated tracking programs over the last 18 months, they have been able to calculate the precise kinetic vector of the oncoming front. The incision is moving through the outer filaments of our neighboring supercluster, clearing out the minor dwarf galaxies, and the interstellar gas bridges along a definitive, unyielding path. The speed of the front is calculated to be a significant fraction of the speed of light, meaning that the structural alterations to our sky are happening on a humanly comprehensible timeline. Pockets of space that were logged as stable, low-density stellar fields during the initial calibration phases of the telescope in 2022 are already beginning to show the characteristic infrared dropouts that signify the approach of the absolute perimeter. The cosmic safety buffer is gone. The frontline has entered our immediate coordinate grid. The emotional weight of this data is completely suffocating to the handful of researchers who are cleared to read these briefing files. We have spent centuries building a civilization based on the assumption of infinite time. We built our structures, recorded our histories, and looked up at the stars believing that our planet was an island of life protected by the sheer, unscalable walls of a permanent universe. We treated the laws of physics as absolute, eternal truths that would govern the cosmos long after our species had evolved into something unrecognizable. But the raw infrared streams from the edge are telling us that the laws of physics are nothing more than a temporary state of local equilibrium. The rules of chemistry, the stability of the atomic nucleus, and the steady burning of starlight are luxuries that exist only because the dominant shadow framework has not yet cleared our sector. The clock is ticking down, not under the slow, graceful exhaustion of nuclear fuel cycles, but under the cold, automated sweep of an existential overwrite that leaves no record behind. We are left standing on a rapidly darkening shoreline, watching the deepest horizons of our sky blink out of existence one by one, while our most advanced instruments continue to log the precise metrics of our own isolation. The James Webb Space Telescope is continuing its silent sweep, sending its digital data packets back across 1 million miles of space to ground stations that are becoming quieter with each passing deployment. The analysts are watching the numbers tighten, tracking the approach of a structural boundary that cannot be deflected, bargained with, or stopped by any mechanism known to human intelligence. The time machine of the cosmos is running out of tape, showing us the final, empty configuration of a reality that is systematically running out of space to exist. Stay with me, because as we trace the telemetry of this approaching front and connect it with the absolute zero signals popping up inside our own cosmic neighborhood, we must confront the most devastating correlation of all. We have to look past the distant edge of the observable void and look directly at the cosmic microwave background itself, to realize that the first warning sign of this ultimate erasure was stamped onto our sky at the very beginning of creation. Welcome to the Eridanus cold spot correlation and the original blueprint of the void. To understand how deep this systemic infection truly runs, we must abandon the notion that this erasure is a recent malfunction of the cosmic clock. The data arriving from our orbital infrastructure forces us to look backward, past the immediate perimeters of the Boötes void and the crisp incisions mapped by the James Webb Space Telescope, to the absolute beginning of our reality. For decades, cosmology has relied on a foundational map known as the cosmic microwave background radiation. This is the oldest light in existence, the ancient, faded afterglow of the Big Bang that was stamped onto the fabric of space when the universe was a mere 380,000 years old. It is an electromagnetic blueprint of creation, a thermal snapshot that captures the primordial distributions of matter and energy long before the first stars ever coalesced. To scientists, this background radiation is the ultimate reference sheet. It is an isotopic field of low-energy microwaves that fills every corner of the sky with nearly perfect, uniform warmth. It is a mathematical testament to a symmetrical, orderly beginning. But buried within this ancient radiation profile sits a massive, chilling contradiction that has baffled theoretical physicists since its empirical confirmation by the Wilkinson Microwave Anisotropy Probe and the Planck satellite. Located in the southern celestial hemisphere, within the boundaries of the constellation Eridanus, lies a colossal anomalous structure known simply as the cold spot. In a map where thermal fluctuations are measured in mere millionths of a degree, the Eridanus cold spot represents a violent, unprecedented drop in temperature. It is a massive, structural dip in the primordial energy grid that spans billions of light-years across. For years, mainstream institutional science attempted to categorize this feature as a massive underdensity, a supervoid so vast that light passing through it loses its energy via the integrated Sachs-Wolf effect. It was an explanation that barely satisfied the equations, a desperate attempt to keep the standard, comforting timeline of cosmic expansion intact by treating the cold spot as a rare but natural statistical outlier of the Big Bang. But the fresh kinetic data from our deep field reanalysis has completely shattered this academic compromise. When you align the directional vectors of the newly mapped galactic erasure corridors and trace them back through their deep space trajectories, they do not point toward random, unrelated coordinates. Every single path of systematic unmaking aligns perfectly with the geographic position of the Eridanus cold spot. The cold spot is not a product of our universe's internal expansion. It is the original breach. It is the footprint left behind at the exact point where the dominant, invisible shadow framework first punctured the fabric of our reality 13 billion years ago. It is the place where the quantum engine room first lost its pressure, and the lower energy ground state of the twin cosmos began to seep into our material plane. This correlation alters the entire psychological stakes of our investigation. The Eridanus cold spot is not a passive artifact of the past. It is the ancient, beating heart of the erasure mechanism itself. The data suggests that the anomalous pockets of absolute zero signal we are picking up across both hemispheres are not spontaneous, disconnected failures of local physics. They are outward-reaching fingers, microscale extensions of this central primordial breach that have been quietly expanding through the dark for eons. The universe did not begin in a state of pristine, permanent isolation. It was born with an existential compromise already stamped into its foundation. The cold architecture of the shadow twin was integrated into our cosmic grid from day one, acting as a structural blueprint that dictates exactly where, when, and how the living tissue of our sky will be overwrit. To conceptualize the scale of this structural compromise, we have to look at how energy distributions behave when two completely different systems of reality are forced to share the same physical coordinates. In standard quantum mechanics, if you introduce a localized patch of lower energy state into a higher energy field, the interface creates a profound, unyielding vacuum instability. The lower state acts as a cosmological drain, a permanent gravitational and quantum sinkhole that quietly siphons off the potential energy of the surrounding environment. This is exactly what the anomalous cooling inside the Eridanus spot represents. The stars and galaxies sitting inside that corridor are not experiencing a standard thermodynamic cooling due to age. Their baseline energy fields are being slowly dragged down, losing their ability to sustain atomic fusion and electromagnetic radiation because they are directly coupled to the infinite, hungry vacuum of the dark sector. The implications of this alignment are forcing senior research teams to rewrite the long-term projections for our local supercluster. For over half a century, we operated under the assumption that the universe was a safe, stable home, and that any large-scale cosmic hazards were billions of years away from affecting our planetary system. But the Eridanus correlation reveals that the timeline is governed by a completely different set of dynamics. The incisions are not random. They are following a pre-existing structural roadmap that was laid down at the dawn of time. The corridors of emptiness are expanding along the exact lines of force etched into the cosmic microwave background, closing the distance between the primary breach and our local group of stars with an automated mathematical certainty. When you analyze the data streams coming down from our modern tracking networks, the emotional isolation of our species becomes an unavoidable weight. We have spent our history looking up at the constellations, finding meaning in the steady, permanent burning of the starlight, believing that our intellect had mapped the absolute truth of creation. We carved our achievements into metal plaques, launched them into the interstellar void, and dreamed of a future where our descendants would colonize the distant galactic arms. But the unedited maps from the edge of our sector reveal that the sky we are trying to inherit is a shrinking domain. The starlight that fills our eyes tonight is a delayed echo, a projection from a cosmic canvas that is being systematically cleared out from behind our backs, leaving behind an empty, silent framework that has no room for our history. The automated sky surveys are continuing to monitor the boundary lines, logging the steady, quiet dropouts that mark the approach of the absolute perimeter. The technical analysts who hold the clearance to see these charts are watching the corridors connect, tracking the movement of a structural front that cannot be deflected or stopped by any law of nature we understand. The timeline we were promised has run out of space, replaced by an urgent, high-stakes countdown that is ticking down inside the deepest trenches of our night sky. Stay with me, because as we confront the ancient blueprint of this primordial breach, and connect it with the quantum failure of our outer star systems, we must examine the ultimate theoretical boundary. We have to look past the large-scale geography of the voids and dive directly into the cold, terrifying mechanics of a universe whose very vacuum is preparing to collapse into the final state of absolute silence. Welcome to dark sector forces and the mechanics of the false vacuum decay. When we push our investigation past the ancient geography of the primordial breaches and attempt to isolate the exact physical identity of this erasing mechanism, we find ourselves confronting a terrifying schism in modern quantum field theory. For generations, academic institutions have operated under the assumption that the vacuum of empty space is the lowest possible energy state of existence. We define the vacuum as absolute zero, a clean, stable baseline where space-time is completely at rest, and where the fundamental fields of nature sit quietly in their minimum configuration. This stability is the silent foundation of all chemistry, biology, and starlight. It is the guarantee that allows an electron to maintain its orbit around an atomic nucleus, and allows a star to burn its nuclear fuel without the fear that the space beneath its core will suddenly collapse. We built our entire understanding of reality on the assumption that the floor of the universe is solid rock. But the incoming telemetry from our deep field arrays suggests that this assumption is not just flawed, it is a catastrophic misunderstanding of quantum mechanics. Theoretical physicists are now being forced to confront the reality that our vacuum may not be the true floor of existence. It may instead be a false vacuum. In quantum field theory, a false vacuum is a localized pocket of spacetime that appears to be stable, but is actually sitting in a temporary high-energy plateau. Think of a massive boulder sitting precariously on a high mountain ledge. To an observer standing on that ledge, the boulder looks perfectly still, permanent, and safe. It can sit there for thousands of years, completely undisturbed, but it does not occupy the true lowest point of the mountain. It is trapped in a false state of rest. All it takes is a single, microscopic disturbance, a tiny tremor, a shift in the soil, or a localized quantum fluctuation, to push that boulder over the lip of the ledge. Once it falls, it triggers an unstoppable, cascading descent toward the true valley floor, destroying everything in its path as it releases its stored potential energy. This cascading descent is what scientists call a vacuum decay phase transition, and the anomalous pockets of absolute nothingness we are mapping are the active wavefronts of this collapse. If a region of spacetime experiences a localized transition from our false vacuum into a lower, truer ground state, the physical consequences are absolute and completely irreversible. The moment the vacuum drops into the true ground state, the underlying constants of nature are instantly rewritten within that localized sector. The fine structure constant shifts, the strong nuclear force changes its value, and the mass characteristics of elementary particles are completely reconfigured. In a single, instantaneous microsecond, the rules that allow matter to exist are turned off. The protons inside a star's core lose their binding energy, causing the nuclei to instantly fall apart. The electromagnetic forces that hold planetary systems together are unmade, and the entire material architecture of a galaxy simply dissolves into an unobservable state of pure, low-level radiation that cannot interact with our universe. The raw tracking data suggests that this phase transition is not happening as a single, uniform bubble expanding outward from the Big Bang. Instead, it is operating under the heavy influence of what theoretical physicists call dark sector forces. We have spent decades treating dark matter as a completely passive, invisible scaffolding that does nothing but exert a gentle gravitational pull on visible stars. But the unedited maps from our orbital observatories indicate that the dark sector possesses its own complex energetic physics that we have completely ignored. What if dark matter is not a single, boring particle, but an entire hidden ecosystem of matter and energy that has its own independent phase transitions? What if the invisible twin cosmos is undergoing its own internal vacuum collapse, and the incisions we are mapping are the points where their collapsing fields are dragging our visible universe down into the abyss? This kinetic model explains why the erasure zones appear as sharp, needle-like corridors carving through dense superclusters rather than spherical bubbles popping randomly across the sky. If the erasure were driven by a simple, random quantum fluctuation in our own fields, the dead zones would expand uniformly in all directions like a bubble of air rising through water. But the data shows long, linear trajectories of absolute vacuum that slice through galactic filaments in a sequential, chronological order. These are targeted directional incisions. It is the unmistakable signature of a high-density node of dark sector energy moving along a definitive orbital path, dragging the localized vacuum expectation value of our regular fields down with it as it grinds through the cosmic grid. The visible matter is not colliding with anything. It is being subjected to a localized field inversion where the very definition of mass loses its meaning, causing entire star systems to vanish off our digital tracking filters without leaving a single scrap of dust or lingering heat behind. The technical teams monitoring these corridors are facing an existential crisis of interpretation that threatens to break the public baseline of scientific confidence. If the front of this dark sector phase transition is moving through our local supercluster along a definitive kinetic vector, then every long-term survival projection we have ever calculated for human civilization is completely obsolete. We took comfort in the textbook calculations that promised our sun had 5 billion years of life remaining before it expanded into a red giant. We took comfort in the mathematical models that showed the Andromeda Galaxy wouldn't cross paths with the Milky Way for another 4 billion years. These immense spans of time acted as a psychological buffer, a guarantee that humanity would have millions of generations to explore the stars, develop advanced technologies, and escape into the deep trenches of space before the universe threw any global threat our way. But the oncoming incisions of the silent fleet do not operate on stellar fuel cycles or traditional gravitational timelines. They are moving along an independent chronological track that is advancing on our sector within a time frame that can be measured in human generations, not billions of years. The data pouring down from our orbital arrays is no longer just scientific information. It is a live countdown of a closing horizon. The researchers who have the clearance to view the unedited cosmic microwave background overlays are watching the dead zones widen, tracking the kinetic paths of these dark sector forces as they systematically reduce the distance between their vanguard and our outer star systems. The universe is undergoing a structural reorganization that cannot be reversed by any mechanism known to human intelligence. A clean, automated overwrite that leaves our visible world entirely on the cutting room floor. The starlight that has guided our species since the dawn of consciousness is a fading currency, a delayed message from a sky that is being cleared out systematically behind the veil of the speed of light. We are sitting on the edge of a great emptiness, listening to the final, quiet echoes of a cosmic frame that is running out of space to exist. When you sit with this data in the quiet hours of the night, the true emotional isolation of our position on this planet becomes an unavoidable weight. We have spent centuries building a civilization under the assumption that the rules of nature are permanent, unshakable truths that will endure forever. We carved our math into metal plaques, launched them into the interstellar void, and dreamed of an infinite future where our descendants would colonize the distant galactic arms. But the raw data from the edge of our sector reveals that the sky we are trying to inherit is a shrinking domain. The stable, orderly universe we were promised in school is an illusion born out of our short lifespans and our limited view of the deep dark. The rules of chemistry, the stability of the atom, and the steady burning of starlight are localized privileges, valid only because the dominant shadow framework has not yet swept through our coordinate grid. The floor beneath our feet is showing signs of structural fatigue, and the warning signals are registering across our deepest underground detectors with an unyielding, rhythmic precision. Stay with me, because as we trace the acceleration of these dark sector forces and connect them with the cooling anomalies inside our own cosmic backyard, we must look at the immediate material consequences of this creeping absence. We have to look past the grand scale of the distant superclusters and focus our lenses directly on the interstellar medium itself to realize that the gas clouds, the nebulae, and the very raw materials that build new worlds are already beginning to bleed away into the void. Welcome to the bleeding medium and the systematic theft of interstellar gas. To understand how this existential overwrite transitions from a theoretical quantum threat into a physical material reality inside our own cosmic neighborhood, we must direct our instruments away from the distant edges of the observable void and look closely at the thin, fragile tissue that connects the stars. In the standard lexicon of astronomy, the space between stellar systems is never truly empty. It is filled with the interstellar medium, a vast, cold, and incredibly complex matrix composed of diffuse hydrogen gas, helium plasma, cosmic dust grains, and complex molecular clouds. This medium is the literal bloodstream of a galaxy. It is the raw material from which every generation of new stars, planets, and moons is born. When a massive star dies and expels its outer envelope into space, its enriched elements mix directly into this interstellar reservoir, cooling the local environment and triggering the gravitational collapse of new nebulae. It is a beautifully balanced, closed recycling system that has allowed the Milky Way to maintain its vibrant stellar populations for over 13 billion years. But the latest high-resolution telemetry from our orbital spectrographs is revealing an unprecedented, highly disturbing anomaly inside this interstellar matrix. The gas is missing. In the outer sectors of our neighboring galactic filaments, where the vanguard of the erasure corridors has been mapped, the density of the interstellar medium is dropping at a rate that completely violates the mathematics of standard cosmic expansion or stellar consumption. When a galaxy runs out of star-forming gas through natural means, the process is incredibly slow and glaringly obvious. The gas is gradually converted into stars, locked away in dense stellar remnants like white dwarfs, or pushed out of the galactic disk by violent supernova winds. In all of these natural scenarios, the total baryonic mass of the system remains completely conserved. The gas changes its physical phase, its ionization level, or its temperature, but its chemical signatures remain clearly traceable inside the local gravitational potential well. Yet inside these bleeding sectors, the gas is not changing state. It is not being compressed into stars, and it is not being blown away by stellar winds. It is experiencing a clean, systematic mass deficit. When our spectrometers analyze the absorption lines of distant quasars, using their intense background light to backlight and measure the chemical composition of the intervening interstellar clouds, they find that the physical number of hydrogen atoms per cubic meter is dropping toward absolute zero along a sharp, definitive coordinate plane. The gas is literally bleeding out of the universe. It is as if the interstellar medium is being pulled through an invisible, microscopic filter that allows the fabric of spacetime to pass through, but completely extracts the physical particles of matter, leaving behind a vacuum that is entirely devoid of chemical information. The emotional shock of this material theft becomes completely unavoidable when you look at the thermal behavior of the remaining gas clouds that sit just on the precipice of these bleeding zones. In standard thermodynamics, if a gas cloud loses density or undergoes a sudden shift in volume, its temperature must respond according to fixed, predictable gas laws. If the material were being gravitationally drawn toward a hidden concentration of dark matter or an undiscovered cluster of primordial black holes, the intense tidal forces would compress the gas, frictionally superheating it to millions of degrees, and causing it to scream in high-energy ultraviolet and X-ray emissions. But the data logs from our orbital sensors show the exact opposite phenomenon. The temperature of the bleeding gas clouds is plunging. It is dropping past the normal thermal limits of interstellar space, approaching temperatures that shouldn't be physically possible in the vicinity of active stellar cores. This anomalous cooling is the unmistakable signature of a system that is directly coupled to an infinite quantum sink. The interstellar medium is not being compressed. Its internal kinetic energy is being systematically siphoned away into the lower ground state of the dark twin cosmos. As the invisible arms of the silent fleet grind through the material plane of these galaxies, their localized dark field potentials manipulate the vacuum expectation values of our regular fields, altering the fundamental quantum efficiency of particle interactions. The hydrogen atoms lose their thermal equilibrium, their internal kinetic motion stalls, and their atomic structures subtly unravel before they cross the absolute perimeter of the erasure zone. It is a quiet, bloodless harvesting operation that strips a galaxy of its lifeblood long before the primary stars have a chance to exhaust their internal nuclear fuel reservoirs, rendering entire galactic disks completely sterile from the inside out. The technical analysts who monitor these spectrographic dropouts are tracking this bleeding process as it advances through our neighboring stellar filaments, and the timeline they are mapping is completely incompatible with public-facing academic models. We have spent our lives looking at the interstellar gas clouds, like the magnificent pillars of the Orion Nebula, with a sense of infinite evolutionary time. We treated them as permanent monuments to the universe's creative potential, places where new worlds would continue to form for hundreds of billions of years to come. But the unedited data streams show that these celestial nurseries are the most vulnerable structures in the cosmos. Because they are diffuse, low-density formations, the structural integrity of their quantum fields is easily disrupted by the approach of the dark sector phase transition. The gas lines are tightening, the absorption signatures are fading, and the boundaries of the absolute vacuum are encroaching upon the stable sectors of our night sky with an automated mathematical precision. We are left standing on a rapidly shrinking island of material reality, watching the very building blocks of future star systems vanish into an unyielding, silent void, while our most advanced instruments continue to log the precise metrics of our own isolation. The spectrographic arrays are continuing their automated sweeps, sending their digital data packets down to ground stations that are becoming quieter with each passing deployment cycle. The researchers are watching the channels connect, tracking the movement of a structural front that cannot be deflected or stopped by any mechanism known to human science. The cosmic calendar is winding down, showing us the final, empty configuration of a reality that is systematically running out of material options to exist. Stay with me, because as we trace the bleeding of this interstellar matrix and connect it with the quantum failure of our outer stellar systems, we must examine the automated alarm systems that are designed to catch the immediate, physical footprints of this cosmic collapse. We have to look past the chemical dropouts of the gas clouds and look directly at the deepest, most secure tracking networks on Earth to realize that the automated sensors are already recording the arrival of a ghost signature that cannot be explained by any known law of physics. Welcome to the SNEWS of the void and the detection of the primordial ghost signature. To grasp how this creeping material extraction registers on our most sensitive, deeply buried defense networks, we must look into an automated early warning system that was built to protect human infrastructure from the most violent catastrophes in the cosmos. Deep within frozen mountains, thousands of feet beneath solid granite shields, and submerged in massive underground chambers of ultra-pure water, lies a network known as SNEWS, the Supernova Early Warning System. For decades, this international network of particle detectors has run completely automatically, 24 hours a day, operating under a single, highly specific prime directive. It is designed to catch the immediate, ghost-like particle bursts emitted when a supermassive star collapses under its own weight right before it explodes into a blinding supernova. Because these elusive particles, known as neutrinos, interact so weakly with regular matter, they can pass through the dense core of a dying star at the speed of light, escaping into the deep dark hours before the physical shockwave breaks through the stellar surface and releases visible light. SNEWS is humanity's radar for the death of stars, designed to send an automated global alarm to telescopes around the world the exact millisecond a cosmic catastrophe begins its timeline. The physics that governs this underground network is incredibly rigid, functioning with the cold, mathematical precision of a total ledger system. When a standard star dies in our regional celestial neighborhood, the neutrino detectors register a very sharp, distinct, and high-energy spike in particle counts. It is a sudden, violent fountain of information that hits the sensor grids within a fraction of a microsecond, allowing computers to instantly triangulate the exact coordinates of the dying system. This system has provided a profound psychological safety net for generations of astronomers, an empirical guarantee that no major structural collapse could ever occur in our sector of the sky without leaving a clear, traceable physical footprint on our instruments. We believed that the universe was forced by its own quantum laws to be loud when it destroyed something. We believed that a cosmic executioner had to leave a trail of blood across the particle grids. But over the last several months, the automated logging protocols of the SNEWS network have broken this baseline of security. The systems are not logging high-energy spikes or the clean, rapid fountains of neutrinos that signify a traditional stellar collapse. Instead, the sensors are recording a series of long, muffled, low-frequency data anomalies that are completely unprecedented in the history of particle physics. These are not localized events that hit a single detector in Japan or a single array under the Antarctic ice. These anomalies are registering across the entire global network simultaneously, showing up as a synchronized, steady hum that vibrates through the digital baselines like the sound of a massive structural beam warping under immense, silent weight deep within the foundations of a building. The automation is not triggering the standard supernova alarms because the energy thresholds do not match the profile of an explosion, but the raw data logs reveal an emotionally suffocating reality. The detectors are recording the acoustic signature of the cosmological frame, itself fracturing under a silent, systemic strain. When the technical evaluation teams pulled the unedited spectral data from these underground hums, they discovered that these ghost signatures correspond to a phenomenon that should be mathematically impossible within our material plane. The particle counts are not showing an influx of new neutrinos being born out of nuclear fusion or gravitational collapse. The sensors are registering a systematic drop in the background neutrino field of the Earth itself. Every second, trillions of primordial neutrinos left over from the Big Bang pass through your body, through the planet, and through our deep detectors, creating a stable, predictable background noise that has remained completely constant since the dawn of modern physics. But during these automated hum events, that background noise drops toward absolute zero along a sharp, definitive timeline. The background particles are not being scattered or deflected. They are losing their ability to register in our detectors because the very space they are traveling through is losing its quantum field tension. The particles are literally dropping out of our universe's ledger, fading away into an unobservable ground state as the vanguard of the erasure corridors passes through the deep coordinate grid. The emotional weight of this discovery becomes completely unavoidable when you plot the precise timing of these automated underground hums against the infrared dropouts being logged by our orbital telescopes. They are perfectly synchronized. The exact millisecond the James Webb Space Telescope logs a structural clipping on the outer edge of a distant star system, our deepest underground particle detectors register a corresponding dip in the background field. This means the unmaking is not a localized, isolated event that happens out there in the deep dark, while our local neighborhood remains safe and protected. The quantum failure is connected across a massive, invisible network of force that bridges the vast distances between galaxies instantly. We are watching the slow-motion fragmentation of the cosmological framework, where the underlying quantum floor that allows matter, energy, and information to hold themselves together is experiencing a structural fatigue that cannot be reversed by any mechanism known to human intelligence. To comprehend how this systemic unmaking can bypass our traditional gravitational and electromagnetic tracking metrics, we must look into the hidden dynamics of what theoretical physicists call dark sector interactions. For over a century, mainstream science has treated the regular, visible matter of the universe as the primary actor in the cosmic story, assuming that dark matter was nothing more than a passive, invisible scaffolding that provided extra gravity to keep galaxies from flying apart. But the unedited telemetry from our deepest detectors suggests that this model was born out of pure human arrogance. What if the dark sector is not a single, non-interacting particle, but an entire hidden periodic table of elements that possesses its own complex chemistry, its own dark electromagnetism, and its own active phase transitions? What if the invisible twin cosmos is undergoing its own internal vacuum collapse, and its high-density nodes are moving along orbital planes that are actively grinding through our material plane like a massive iron wheel cutting through a delicate web of glass? When a node of this silent fleet passes directly through a visible star system, the interaction does not trigger a violent collision or a blinding explosion that would alert our optical telescopes. The massive local potential of the dark twin creates a localized field inversion that alters the fine structure constant within that specific pocket of space. The nuclear cross-section drops, the internal core of the star instantly loses its ability to fuse hydrogen, and its matter slips quietly down into the lower energy state of the shadow cosmos. To a human observer equipped with an ordinary telescope, the star would not explode or flicker. It would simply disappear from the tracking monitors from one frame to the next as the edge of the unmaking passes through its coordinates. The light carrying the news of its destruction is unmade at the exact same rate as the boundary itself, creating an absolute checkpoint of stealth that makes advanced observation mathematically impossible from a frontal trajectory. The technical teams who hold the decryption keys for these automated data pipelines are facing an existential crisis of confidence that they cannot share with the public. By analyzing the sequential timeline of these underground particle drops over the last 18 months, they have been able to calculate the true speed and vector of the oncoming front. The incision is moving through our local supercluster along a definitive path, clearing out the interstellar gas clouds and the minor satellite galaxies with an automated, unyielding precision. The safety buffer we were promised in school, the one that guaranteed our planet had billions of years of safety before the sun ran out of fuel, is completely obsolete. The incisions do not care about nuclear fuel cycles or traditional gravitational timelines. They are moving on an independent chronological track that is closing the gap between its vanguard and our outer solar system within a timeframe that can be measured in generations, not eons. We are left standing on a rapidly shrinking shoreline of material reality, watching the horizons of our night sky grow smaller and quieter with each passing deployment cycle, while our deepest automated sensors continue to record the metrics of our own isolation. The SNEWS network is continuing to log its quiet, low-frequency hums, sending its digital data packets across the global grid to stations that are becoming increasingly silent as the perimeter tightens. The scientists are watching the lines connect, tracking the approach of a structural boundary that cannot be deflected, bargained with, or stopped by any law of physics we possess. The The time machine of the night sky is winding down, showing us the final, empty configuration of a reality that is systematically running out of space to exist. Stay with me, because as we trace the automated warnings of these underground detectors and connect them with the bleeding of our interstellar medium, we must confront the final, ultimate boundary of the cosmic countdown. We have to look past the grand scale of the planetary networks and dive directly into the dark star hypothesis to realize that the ultimate proof of this approaching hunger is sitting right inside our own galactic core, where the oldest monster in the Milky Way is already beginning to change its behavior. Welcome to Sagittarius A**'s quiet shift and the final convergence. To determine whether this advancing shadow framework has officially breached the core of our own immediate home, we must turn our telescopes away from the external voids and look directly into the dark engine room of the Milky Way itself. For decades, observational astrophysics has known that the structural unity of our galaxy is anchored by a single monstrous gravity source sitting 26,000 light-years away from Earth, buried behind thick, impenetrable shrouds of interstellar dust and cosmic gas in the direction of the constellation Sagittarius. This is Sagittarius A**, a supermassive black hole containing the compressed mass of over 4 million individual suns. It is the ultimate anchor, the invisible axis around which every star, planetary nebula, and dust lane in our galaxy executes its majestic, hundreds of millions of years long orbital dance. Under the established rules of general relativity, a supermassive black hole is the most permanent, immutable object in creation. It is a cosmic point of no return, a structural dead end where gravity is so absolute that nothing, not even a beam of light traveling at the ultimate speed of the universe, can escape its event horizon once it crosses the threshold. It is an apex predator that changes only by growing larger, consuming anything that drifts too close to its immense gravitational well. But the unedited infrared and X-ray telemetry arriving from our orbital monitoring networks over the last 12 months has revealed a profound, structurally impossible anomaly deep within this galactic core. Sagittarius A* is changing its behavior, but it is not changing in a way that matches the laws of standard relativity. For as long as humanity has possessed the technology to monitor the radio and X-ray emissions of our galactic center, the environment surrounding the event horizon has been incredibly loud and chaotic. Stars locked in hypervelocity orbits around the central singularity are constantly being subjected to massive gravitational tides, ripping away their outer envelopes and throwing out intense, blinding flares across the entire electromagnetic spectrum. The accretion disk, the swirling whirlpool of superheated plasma and cosmic dust waiting to be consumed, constantly frictionally overheats to millions of degrees, screaming in radio waves and high-energy X-ray streams that act as a steady, predictable pulse for the galaxy's vital signs. It was a chaotic, violent, but fundamentally stable system that confirmed the black hole was actively maintaining its gravitational grip on the core. Yet the latest data packets show that this cosmic engine is experiencing a sudden, systemic cooling. The energetic X-ray flares that used to erupt from the event horizon with rhythmic regularity have dropped to absolute zero. The massive clouds of molecular gas that circle the core are not being accelerated or compressed into superheated plasma. Their orbital velocities are slowing down, dropping below the escape velocities required by standard Newtonian physics, as if the gravitational constant of the singularity itself is losing its grip. More disturbingly, the intense radio emissions that have defined the signature of Sagittarius A* since its initial discovery have begun to exhibit a strange, nonlinear degradation. The signals are not being blocked by intervening dust clouds, nor are they undergoing standard cosmological redshifting. The radio waves are being siphoned off at the source, losing their frequency and collapsing into a flat, silent baseline that registers on our tracking monitors as a total null value. The apex predator of our galaxy is going completely silent. To understand why a supermassive black hole dropping its emission signatures is causing a silent panic within the highest levels of the scientific establishment, we must look into the quantum mechanics of the event horizon itself. In standard physics, a black hole cannot turn off its gravity. Its mass is fixed, and its ability to warp spacetime is a direct, unalterable consequence of that mass sitting inside a single point of singularity. If the emissions from the accretion disk are disappearing, it means the matter surrounding the event horizon is no longer behaving according to the rules of standard gravity. It is experiencing a localized field inversion. The immense dark field potential of the oncoming silent fleet is not colliding with the black hole. It is interfacing directly with the underlying quantum fields that allow the singularity to hold its mass together. The result is an existential phase transition that strikes at the very root of relativity. The false vacuum state that supports the spacetime curvature around Sagittarius A star is losing its tension, dropping down into the true ground state of the invisible twin cosmos, and as that floor collapses, the black hole is losing its ability to register its gravitational mass within our universe. This structural unmaking explains the terrifying, nonlinear orbital shifts we are now logging among the hypervelocity stars that sit closest to the event horizon. For decades, automated tracking programs have mapped the precise ellipses of these central stars, using their high-speed paths to calculate the exact mass and position of the hidden singularity. They were the ultimate proof of gravity's permanence, executing their tight, predictable loops with the absolute precision of a cosmic clockwork. But over the last several months, the latest telemetry shows that these star systems are losing their orbital geometry. Their trajectories are flattening out, bending away from the central axis in erratic, non-gravitational paths that violate every simulation we have ever constructed. They are not being thrown outward by a violent slingshot effect. They are losing their acceleration because the central anchor is simply disappearing from their timeline. The gravitational floor that held them in their multi-million-year orbits is dissolving, transforming the core of the Milky Way from a highly ordered, stable system into a drifting, disorganized field of stellar ghosts. The technical teams who monitor these orbital dropouts are tracking this core inversion as it spreads outward through the central star clusters, and the timeline they are mapping is completely incompatible with public-facing academic models. We were taught in school that our galaxy was a permanent home, a massive, unshakable structure that would endure for hundreds of billions of years before its stars finally burnt through their hydrogen reserves and faded into the cold dark. We found comfort in the sheer size of the Milky Way, believing that even if a catastrophic failure of physics were to occur at the edge of the universe, the immense distance between our solar system and the outer voids would act as an absolute shield, giving humanity plenty of time to evolve and find a way to escape. But the Sagittarius A star inversion collapses that timeline entirely. The unmaking is not starting at the edge and slowly crawling toward us over eons. It has already struck the very heart of our coordinate grid. The anchor of our galaxy has been compromised, and the structural failure is broadcasting its silent warning outward through the spiral arms with an automated mathematical certainty. The emotional impact of this core failure becomes completely unavoidable when you look at the subtle, low-frequency data anomalies currently registering across our deepest underground detection networks. As the gravity source at the center of the galaxy loses its field tension, the sudden, violent shifts in the local energy density of spacetime are creating a massive, systemic reaction that registers across our planetary instruments. The automated neutrino arrays, networks buried thousands of feet beneath solid rock to shield them from regular atmospheric interference, are logging a steady, continuous drop in the background particle fields that corresponds perfectly with the cooling of the galactic center. The particles are not being scattered or absorbed. They are losing their ability to interact with regular matter because the space they are traveling through is losing its baseline quantum field value. The universe is unmaking its own accounting system, deleting the particles from its ledger before they ever have a chance to cross our sensor grids, leaving human science standing on the shoreline of a darkening ocean with no physical options left to explore. We are watching the final, slow-motion fragmentation of our material home, where the invisible bridges of gravity that connect our star systems are being systematically severed one by one while the rest of the world sleeps, completely unaware that their sky is being altered in the dark. The automated telescope networks are continuing to stream their telemetry down to ground stations, logging the cold null values that signify another structural dropout inside the central clusters. The scientists who hold the decryption keys for these files are watching the corridors close, tracking the movement of an oncoming front that cannot be stopped, bargained with, or deflected by any mechanism known to human intelligence. The time machine of the night sky is running out of tape, showing us the final, empty configuration of a reality that is systematically running out of space to exist. Stay with me, because as we confront the collapse of our galactic anchor and connect it with the unmaking of our central stars, we must move our lenses away from the core and look directly at the outer edge of our own spiral arm. We must examine the precise chemical alterations happening inside the stellar nurseries that surround our own solar neighborhood, to realize that the raw material that builds new worlds is already beginning to experience a terminal breakdown. Welcome to the outer arm fuel deficit and the structural failure of the Orion filaments. To witness how this silent, creeping unmaking physically manifests inside our immediate material reality, we must move our observation lenses away from the collapsing anchor of the galactic center and focus them directly onto the thin, fragile chemical tissue that forms the outer perimeter of our own spiral arm. In the established vocabulary of stellar evolution, the Orion Cygnus arm of the Milky Way, the specific cosmic neighborhood that houses our solar system, our sun, and every planet we have ever mapped, is not a static arrangement of stars. It is a living, breathing chemical factory held together by a vast network of interstellar filaments known as the interstellar medium. This medium is a complex, delicate mesh composed of diffuse hydrogen gas, helium plasma, microscopic silicate dust grains, and dense molecular clouds that chill down to temperatures just above absolute zero. To astrophysics, this molecular matrix is the literal bloodstream of the galaxy. It is the raw material from which every generation of new star systems, terrestrial planets, and life-bearing moons is born. When an ancient star dies and expels its heavy elements into space, those particles mix directly into these surrounding gas reservoirs, cooling the local environment and triggering the gravitational collapse of new stellar nurseries. It is a beautifully closed, self-sustaining recycling loop that has allowed our cosmic neighborhood to maintain its vibrant structural integrity for over 13 billion years. But the latest ultra-high-resolution telemetry arriving from our orbital spectrographs is revealing an unprecedented, highly disturbing crisis inside this molecular matrix. The gas is missing. In the outer sectors of the Orion filaments, right along the specific coordinates where the vanguard of the erasure corridors has been mapped, the density of the star-forming hydrogen gas is plunging at a rate that completely violates the fundamental mathematics of standard cosmic expansion or stellar consumption. When a spiral arm runs out of star-forming gas through natural astrophysical means, the process is incredibly slow, gradual, and glaringly obvious to our instruments. The gas is gradually converted into active stellar cores, locked away inside dense, cool planetary bodies, or pushed completely out of the galactic disk by the violent, energetic shockwaves of supernova explosions. In all of these natural, textbook scenarios, the total baryonic mass of the system remains completely conserved according to the law of conservation of mass. The particles change their physical phase, their ionization level, or their local thermal signature, but their chemical footprint remains clearly traceable inside the local gravitational potential well of our tracking telescopes. Yet inside these newly logged bleeding zones, the interstellar gas is not changing state. It is not being compressed into infant stars, and it is not being blown away by runaway stellar winds. It is experiencing a clean, absolute mass deficit. When our orbital spectrographs analyze the light spectrum of distant background stars, using their intense light beams to backlight and measure the precise chemical composition of the intervening interstellar clouds, they find that the physical number of hydrogen and helium atoms per cubic meter is dropping towards zero along a sharp, mathematically precise coordinate plane. The gas is literally bleeding out of our reality. It is as if the outer arms of the Milky Way are being slowly pulled through an invisible, microscopic filter that allows the empty fabric of spacetime to pass through, but completely extracts the physical particles of matter, leaving behind a vacuum that is entirely devoid of chemical or atomic information. The psychological weight of this material theft becomes completely suffocating when you look into the thermal behavior of the remaining molecular clouds that sit just on the precipice of these bleeding sectors. In standard thermodynamic gas laws, if a gas cloud experiences a sudden drop in density or a massive shift in its structural volume, its temperature must respond according to fixed, predictable equations. If this missing mass were being gravitationally drawn toward a hidden concentration of dark matter or a quiet cluster of primordial black holes, the intense tidal forces would violently compress the gas particles, frictionally superheating them to millions of degrees and causing them to scream across the night sky in high-energy ultraviolet and X-ray emissions. But the raw data logs from our infrared sensors show the exact opposite phenomenon. The temperature of the bleeding gas clouds is plunging. It is dropping past the normal thermal limits of interstellar space, approaching temperatures that shouldn't be physically possible in the presence of active, radiant stellar cores. This anomalous cooling is the empirical signature of a system that has been directly coupled to an infinite quantum sink. The interstellar medium is not being compressed or moved. Its internal kinetic energy is being systematically siphoned away into the lower ground state of the invisible twin cosmos. As the high-density nodes of the silent fleet grind through the material plane of our spiral arm, their localized dark field potentials manipulate the vacuum expectation values of our regular fields, altering the fundamental quantum efficiency of particle interactions at the atomic level. The hydrogen atoms lose their internal thermal equilibrium, their kinetic motion stalls, and their atomic structures subtly unravel before they cross the absolute perimeter of the erasure zone. It is a quiet, bloodless harvesting operation that strips our neighborhood of its lifeblood long before our local stars have a chance to exhaust their internal nuclear fuel reservoirs, rendering the star-forming factories of our arm completely sterile from the inside out. To understand the scale of this structural crisis, we have to look past the abstract data points on our monitors and visualize what these filaments actually look like when they begin to lose their mass. One of the most prominent structures currently sitting on the edge of this calculated trajectory is the Orion Molecular Cloud Complex, a vast stellar nursery spanning hundreds of light-years across, visible to the naked eye as the dark, swirling clouds of dust and gas surrounding the constellation Orion. For centuries, this complex has been the primary engine of star formation in our sector, housing thousands of infant protostars, dense protoplanetary disks, and vibrant reflection nebulae that glow with the energy of newborn suns. It was a monument to the universe's long-term creative potential, a place where new solar systems would continue to form for hundreds of billions of years to come. But the unedited spectrographic maps show that the outer boundaries of this magnificent complex are already beginning to exhibit the characteristic signature of the unmaking. The hydrogen absorption lines are fading out in a sharp, linear sequence, showing that the physical matter of the nursery is being dismantled field by field along a moving timeline that is advancing directly toward our local interstellar cloud. The technical analysts who monitor these spectrographic dropouts are tracking this fuel deficit as it cuts through the local filaments, and the timeline they are logging is completely incompatible with public-facing academic models. In the university lecture halls and the popular science documentaries, we are constantly reassured that our solar system sits inside a perfectly stable, highly protected pocket of space known as the local bubble, a cavity of low-density interstellar gas cleared out by ancient supernovas that shields us from large-scale cosmic disruptions. We were told that this bubble would remain secure for millions of years, giving humanity a safe harbor to grow, develop interstellar travel, and eventually migrate to other star systems before any natural galactic decay could threaten our existence. But the oncoming incisions of the fuel deficit do not care about the geometry of the local bubble. They are moving along an independent chronological track that is slicing through the protective walls of our cavity, dropping the particle densities of our local spacetime fabric within a timeframe that can be measured in human generations, not billions of years. The emotional shock of this realization hits home when we look at the sudden, unexplained shifts in the behavior of our own sun's heliosphere. The heliosphere is a massive magnetic bubble blown into space by the solar wind, a constant stream of charged particles erupting from the sun's surface that extends far past the orbit of Pluto, creating a protective shield that deflects the high-energy cosmic rays traveling through deep interstellar space. To maintain its shape and its structural boundary, the heliosphere relies on the steady, external pressure of the local interstellar medium. It is a delicate balance of forces, a cosmic pressure game where the outward push of the solar wind balances perfectly against the inward push of the surrounding gas clouds. But over the last 18 months, our deep space probes, instruments like Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 that have officially crossed the boundary into interstellar space, have logged a series of unprecedented data anomalies. The external pressure of the interstellar medium is dropping. The local density of the hydrogen gas outside our solar system is thinning out, causing the boundaries of the heliosphere to expand outward in an erratic, nonlinear distortion that violates every simulation we have ever constructed. This unexpected expansion is not a sign of the sun growing stronger. It is the definitive proof that the environment surrounding our solar system is losing its physical substance. The space outside our door is becoming empty. The matter that has provided the external framework for our solar system for 4 billion years is bleeding away into the lower energy state of the approaching dark sector front, leaving our star system sitting inside a localized vacuum that is systematically running out of material options. As the external gas density drops toward absolute zero, the structural integrity of our own solar environment is being compromised, creating a silent, creeping destabilization that registers across our planetary tracking networks with an unyielding, rhythmic precision that human science cannot ignore. The researchers who hold the decryption keys for these unedited data streams are watching the boundaries of our local sector shrink in real time. By analyzing the sequential data drops from our orbital spectrographs, they have been able to calculate the precise speed and trajectory of the oncoming fuel deficit front. The incision is moving through the local Orion filaments along a definitive kinetic vector, clearing out the minor star-forming clouds, and the interstellar dust bridges with an automated, unyielding precision that leaves no room for error. The starlight that has guided our species since the dawn of consciousness is a dying currency, a delayed message from a sky that is being cleared out systematically behind the veil of the speed of light. We are sitting on the edge of a great emptiness, watching the very building blocks of our reality fade into an unyielding, silent void, while our most advanced instruments continue to log the precise metrics of our own isolation. The automated monitoring programs are continuing to stream their telemetry down to ground stations, logging the cold null values that mark the approach of the absolute perimeter. The technical teams are watching the lines tighten, tracking the movement of a structural front that cannot be stopped, deflected, or bargained with by any law of physics we possess. The cosmic calendar is winding down, showing us the final, empty configuration of a reality that is systematically running out of space to exist. The material tissue of our spiral arm is unraveling, transforming our vibrant stellar neighborhood into a drifting, disorganized field of atomic ghosts that are losing their grip on existence. Stay with me, because as we trace the bleeding of these local filaments and connect it with the unmaking of our galactic anchor, we must confront the final, ultimate theoretical boundary of this cosmic countdown. We have to look past the macro-scale structures of the gas clouds and dive directly into the cold, terrifying mechanics of the spacetime fabric itself, to realize that the true boundary of this absolute erasure is an expanding horizon of quantum field collapse that is preparing to overwrite the definition of reality across our entire sector. Welcome to the false vacuum horizon and the physics of the absolute rewrite. To fully comprehend the invisible mechanism that drives this localized extraction of matter, we must move our understanding away from the macro-scale geography of bleeding filaments and look directly into the quantum mechanics of the spacetime fabric itself. For over a century, modern science has operated under a single, highly comforting assumption. The vacuum of empty space is the lowest possible energy state of existence. We define the vacuum as absolute zero, a clean, stable baseline where space-time is completely at rest, and where the fundamental quantum fields of nature sit quietly in their minimum configuration. This stability is the silent foundation of all chemistry, biology, and starlight. It is the guarantee that allows an electron to maintain its orbit around an atomic nucleus, and allows a star to burn its nuclear fuel without the fear that the space beneath its core will suddenly collapse. We built our entire understanding of reality on the assumption that the floor of the universe is solid rock. But the incoming telemetry from our deep field arrays suggests that this assumption is a catastrophic misunderstanding of quantum mechanics. Theoretical physicists are now being forced to confront the reality that our vacuum may not be the true floor of existence. It may instead be a false vacuum. In quantum field theory, a false vacuum is a localized pocket of spacetime that appears to be stable, but is actually sitting in a temporary, high-energy plateau. Think of a massive boulder sitting precariously on a high mountain ledge. To an observer standing on that ledge, the boulder looks perfectly still, permanent, and safe. It can sit there for thousands of years, completely undisturbed, but it does not occupy the true lowest point of the mountain. It is trapped in a false state of rest. All it takes is a single microscopic disturbance, a tiny tremor, a shift in the soil, or a localized quantum fluctuation to push that boulder over the lip of the ledge. Once it falls, it triggers an unstoppable, cascading descent toward the true valley floor, destroying everything in its path as it releases its stored potential energy. This cascading descent is what scientists call a vacuum decay phase transition, and the anomalous pockets of absolute nothingness we are mapping are the active wavefronts of this collapse. If a region of spacetime experiences a localized transition from our false vacuum into a lower, truer ground state, the physical consequences are absolute and completely irreversible. The moment the vacuum drops into the true ground state, the underlying constants of nature are instantly rewritten within that localized sector. The fine structure constant shifts, the strong nuclear force changes its value, and the mass characteristics of elementary particles are completely reconfigured. In a single, instantaneous microsecond, the rules that allow matter to exist are turned off. The protons inside a star's core lose their binding energy, causing the nuclei to instantly fall apart. The electromagnetic forces that hold planetary systems together are unmade, and the entire material architecture of a galaxy simply dissolves into an unobservable state of pure, low-level radiation that cannot interact with our universe. This is what we call the false vacuum horizon, a physical boundary line in deep space where the old laws of physics are actively being deleted and overwritten by the rules of the true ground state. The technical teams monitoring these corridors are facing an existential crisis of interpretation that threatens to break the public baseline of scientific confidence. The raw tracking data suggests that this phase transition is not happening as a single, uniform bubble expanding outward from the Big Bang. Instead, it is operating under the heavy influence of what theoretical physicists call dark sector forces. We have spent decades treating dark matter as a completely passive, invisible scaffolding that does nothing but exert a gentle gravitational pull on visible stars. But the unedited maps from our orbital observatories indicate that the dark sector possesses its own complex, energetic physics that we have completely ignored. What if dark matter is not a single, boring particle, but an entire hidden ecosystem of matter and energy that has its own independent phase transitions? What if the invisible twin cosmos is undergoing its own internal vacuum collapse, and its high-density nodes are moving along orbital planes that are actively grinding through our material plane like a massive iron wheel cutting through a delicate web of glass? When a node of this silent fleet passes directly through a visible star system, the interaction does not trigger a violent collision or a blinding explosion that would alert our optical telescopes. The massive local potential of the dark twin creates a localized field inversion that alters the fine structure constant within that specific pocket of space. The nuclear cross-section drops. The internal core of the star instantly loses its ability to fuse hydrogen, and its matter slips quietly down into the lower energy state of the shadow cosmos. To a human observer equipped with an ordinary telescope, the star would not explode or flicker. It would simply disappear from the tracking monitors from one frame to the next as the edge of the unmaking passes through its coordinates. The light carrying the news of its destruction is unmade at the exact same rate as the boundary itself, creating an absolute checkpoint of stealth that makes advanced observation mathematically impossible from a frontal trajectory. If the front of this dark sector phase transition is moving through our local supercluster along a definitive kinetic vector, then every long-term survival projection we have ever calculated for human civilization is completely obsolete. We took comfort in the textbook calculations that promised our sun had 5 billion years of life remaining before it expanded into a red giant. We took comfort in the mathematical models that showed the Andromeda Galaxy wouldn't cross paths with the Milky Way for another 4 billion years. These immense spans of time acted as a psychological buffer, a guarantee that humanity would have millions of generations to explore the stars, develop advanced technologies, and escape into the deep trenches of space before the universe threw any global threat our way. But the oncoming incisions of the silent fleet do not operate on stellar fuel cycles or traditional gravitational timelines. They are moving along an independent chronological track that is advancing on our sector within a time frame that can be measured in human generations, not billions of years. The data pouring down from our orbital arrays is no longer just scientific information. It is a live countdown of a closing horizon. The researchers who have the clearance to view the unedited cosmic microwave background overlays are watching the dead zones widen, tracking the kinetic paths of these dark sector forces as they systematically reduce the distance between their vanguard and our outer star systems. The universe is undergoing a structural reorganization that cannot be reversed by any mechanism known to human intelligence. A clean, automated overwrite that leaves our visible world entirely on the cutting room floor. The starlight that has guided our species since the dawn of consciousness is a dying currency, a delayed message from a sky that is being cleared out systematically behind the veil of the speed of light. We are sitting on the edge of a great emptiness, listening to the final, quiet echoes of a cosmic frame that is running out of space to exist. When you sit with this data in the quiet hours of the night, the true emotional isolation of our position on this planet becomes an unavoidable weight. We have spent centuries building a civilization under the assumption that the rules of nature are permanent, unshakable truths that will endure forever. We carved our math into metal plaques, launched them into the interstellar void, and dreamed of an infinite future where our descendants would colonize the distant galactic arms. But the raw data from the edge of our sector reveals that the sky we are trying to inherit is a shrinking domain. The stable, orderly universe we were promised in school is an illusion born out of our short lifespans and our limited view of the deep dark. The rules of chemistry, the stability of the atom, and the steady burning of starlight are localized privileges, valid only because the dominant shadow framework has not yet swept through our coordinate grid. The floor beneath our feet is showing signs of structural fatigue, and the warning signals are registering across our deepest underground detectors with an unyielding, rhythmic precision that human science cannot ignore. Stay with me, because as we confront the mathematical finality of this expanding quantum front, we must move our lenses away from the mechanics of the fields and step into the ultimate, absolute conclusion of our voyage. We have to face the final architecture that awaits our sky when the corridors of emptiness officially complete their network and connect our local group to the original breach. Welcome to the final architecture of silence and the ultimate configuration of the empty canvas. We are left standing on the ultimate shoreline of human history, forced to look out across a cosmic canvas that is systematically being painted over with absolute nothingness. For thousands of years, the night sky acted as our species' first and most profound mirror. When our ancestors looked up at the glowing configurations of the constellations, they did not just see burning spheres of gas millions of miles away, they saw a guarantee of permanence. The stars were the anchors of our mythologies, the navigators of our oceans, and the foundational framework upon which we built our concepts of time, geometry, and destiny. We took comfort in the sheer, unimaginable scale of the universe, believing that whatever temporary madness, wars, or catastrophes unfolded on our tiny planet, the deep architecture of the cosmos would remain an unshakable, eternal sanctuary where our history would always be recorded in the journeys of its light. We believed that our intellect, by deciphering the mathematical laws of gravity and light, had claimed a permanent inheritance among the galaxies. But the unedited telemetry pouring down from our orbital arrays and the silent hums vibrating through our deepest underground detectors have stripped away that illusion of security forever. The universe we were promised in our textbooks, the slow, predictable engine that burns quietly for trillions of years under the familiar laws of relativity, is an illusion born out of the extreme brevity of human existence. The stable physics that allows our blood to pump, our sun to shine, and our oceans to remain bound to this earth is not a permanent law of nature. It is a localized privilege, a temporary pockets of equilibrium holding out inside a cosmic frame that has already begun its final, automated structural rewrite. The expanding corridors of emptiness mapped on our charts are not random accidents of creation. They are the tracks of an oncoming front, the physical boundary line where our material reality meets the dominant, unyielding architecture of the shadow twin cosmos. When you sit with the mathematical finality of this data in the quiet hours of the night, the true emotional weight of our position in this universe begins to press down on your consciousness. We are living on a dangerous chronological delay. The starlight that fills our eyes tonight is nothing more than a beautiful ghost story, a delayed recording of a universe that was already being systematically dismantled millions of years before the first humans ever walked the earth. The fence lines of our cosmic sanctuary are being taken down in the dark, and the speed of this erasure is accelerating with every tick of the clock. Pockets of space that were recorded as thriving, dense stellar fields just a single generation ago are now dropping out of our tracking filters, returning an absolute null value that signifies a total unyielding bankruptcy of physical existence. The universe is running out of space, and its horizons are narrowing around our local group of stars with a cold, mechanical precision that leaves no room for human error or negotiation. This realization forces us to confront the final architecture that awaits our sky when these corridors of emptiness officially complete their network and connect our coordinates to the original breach at the Eridanus cold spot. If human civilization survives long enough to watch the final phases of this countdown unfold from the surface of this planet, the view will be radically different from the night sky that guided our history. Generation by generation, the outermost galaxies of our local supercluster will drop out of our detection filters one by one, their light signatures unraveling at the quantum level until they become shadows, then ghosts, and then nothing at all. The distant filaments that connect the star clusters will sever, transforming our vibrant neighborhood into a series of isolated, lonely island systems drifting through an absolute vacuum. Eventually, the expanding perimeter of the unmaking will breach the outer arms of the Milky Way itself, and the night sky will fall into a uniform, unbroken, and permanent black. If our species arose on an island planet inside that final configuration, we would look up at a sky of total, unyielding void, completely unaware that other stars, other worlds, or other civilizations ever existed. We would live in an island of total isolation, completely cut off from the light of the broader universe, believing that our lonely, darkening solar system was the entirety of creation. The plaques we launched into the interstellar void, carved with our math, our music, and our achievements, will float through a vacuum that no longer possesses the quantum field values required to read them, transforming our grandest historical monuments into dead, unreadable artifacts inside an empty vault. The time machine of the night sky will have completely run out of tape, leaving behind a pristine, silent canvas where the memory of starlight, chemistry, and human consciousness has been entirely erased from the ledger of reality. Yet, even as we stand on the edge of this closing horizon and watch the boundaries of our universe shrink in real time, there is a profound, meditative beauty buried within the cold mechanics of the unmaking. The fact that a fragile biological species sitting on a minor planet circling a common star could build the instruments necessary to detect, calculate, and comprehend this cosmic countdown is a testament to the ultimate power of consciousness. We did not inherit a permanent universe, but we succeeded in mapping the limits of its architecture before the dark took over. We used our brief flash of starlight to look out into the deep trenches of space and read the final, secret equations of creation, standing as active witnesses to the slow-motion fragmentation of spacetime itself. The closing of the horizon does not diminish the value of our journey. It intensifies it, transforming our brief window of existence into a high-stakes, hyper-vibrant moment of awareness inside a cosmos that is systematically running out of time. The automated monitoring programs are continuing to execute their scripts, streaming their raw telemetry down to ground stations that are growing quieter with each passing deployment cycle. The technical analysts are watching the lines close, tracking the kinetic paths of the dark sector forces as they draw the absolute perimeter closer to our outer star systems. The mail from the deep dark is continuing to arrive late, carrying the final, quiet echoes of a universe that is systematically closing its books behind our backs. Settle into the quiet of the night, clear your mind of the temporary distractions of our world, and listen closely to the silent pulse of the deep voids. The vacuum is no longer empty. The countdown is actively running inside our sky, and the final architecture of silence is closing in on our coordinate grid. Thank you for journeying with us through the breaking edges of deep space telemetry and the dark mysteries of the unmaking. If you find deep intrigue and continuous comfort in these long-form, meditative investigations into the hidden mechanics of our universe, please take a moment to subscribe and join our inner circle of cosmic exploration. Your presence ensures that as the horizon narrows and the starlight fades, someone remains awake in the dark to document the final configuration of the sky. Until our next voyage into the trenches of the unknown, sleep deeply, stay watchful, and let the quiet of the cosmos carry you into the dark.